Hello and welcome to the Third Sector podcast. I'm Lucinda Rouse.
And I'm Emily Burt. Each week we bring you half an hour of discussion and debate about the important goings-on in the charity world. And this week we're looking into the world of streaming as a form of fundraising and a means of building communities around your charity in a virtual space. Now, video gaming is an inherently social activity. Even before the multiplayer behemoths of your Fortnite or your Call of Duty variety were big, the kids of the 90s, of which I am one, were playing Tekken or Mario Kart in each other's living rooms. Streaming is something that takes this to the next level. For people who might not be familiar, it involves recording or broadcasting yourself playing games to an online audience. Personality is a really big part of this. Streamers will usually monologue their way through games, take on niche challenges, interact with audience members if they're doing a live stream, or bring on guests to join them. It's an opportunity to reach a massive audience of like-minded people. And sometimes you can encourage that massive audience to donate to a cause that you feel passionate about. One of the first stories I remember covering when I joined Third Sector in 2019 was the story of Harry Brewis, or H-Bomber Guy, as he's known online, spending 57 hours playing the Nintendo game Donkey Kong 64 in a fundraising endeavour that ended up raising more than $350,000 for the transgender children's support charity Mermaids.
You really can't argue with that use of time when it raises that kind of figure for charity, can you? And it is a bandwagon that some charities have been on for years. One example is Jingle Jam, which is a huge gaming event held every December. And last year it raised £3.5 million for 8 charities. But the fundraising and streaming space is not just reserved for the sector giants. Get Together Through Gaming is an annual event run by Leeds Mind. And it's so far raised more than £20,000 across the 3 years that it's been running. And its 4th edition is coming up next month. So without further ado, time to introduce our guests for this week. First up is Emily Cotter, who is the Marketing, PR and Communications Officer at Leeds Mind. Hi, Emily.
Hiya.
And also with us is Col Grist, founder and creative director of the digital agency Few and Far, which co-created Get Together Through Gaming with Leeds Mind. He's also a trustee of Leeds Mind. Hi.
Hello there. Thanks for having me.
So you've described streaming as a missed fundraising opportunity for many charities. Why is that?
I don't believe charities in the UK are aware of the breadth and scale of live stream fundraising. So as of January this year, Games Done Quick, which is abbreviated to GDQ, is a biannual gaming marathon in the United States, and that has just raised around $60 million for charities, including Prevent Cancer Foundation, Doctors Without Borders, and many others. And I think if charities in this country were a little bit more aware of the sheer amount of money that can be raised through something like this, I think a lot more charities would be already interested and involved in it.
So do you think it's just the lack of awareness for gaming and streaming as a form of fundraising that is preventing charities in this country from making those huge sums of money that people in the States are achieving? Or is there some other kind of like systemic constraint that means that charities aren't tapping into this?
I think it is a lack of understanding and knowledge. I think the Jingle Jam's a good example where charities can apply to be part of it, and then the rest of it is dealt with on their behalf. But a lot of charities have the power to do it and have it managed in their own hands, as Leeds Mind have proved. It's a bit of a newer thing for a younger audience, and so I think a lot of charities are just unaware of the potential that it can offer.
I think, to my mind, there's that demystification side of it as well. So maybe the charities that are aware of the opportunity kind of don't know where to start, and it feels like something big and challenging and confusing. So there might be people kind of tinkering around the edges, but it's not something that they know how to jump into.
So Col, if you wanted to deliver a very basic top line streaming 101 for newbies to this space, what would you kind of explain as the big difference between gaming and then streaming as a fundraising device?
I don't know if there's actually a lot of difference between gaming and streaming fundraising. anyone can actually stream from their home console. If you have a PlayStation 4 or a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox, something like that, your controller already has a broadcast button built into it. So you could press that, connect to Twitch or YouTube and stream. So whatever you're playing, that'll be live and people can tune in. Basically, fundraise streaming is just taking that one step further. So it's the same, but someone playing something, they are doing an activity, they are singing, they are drawing, playing bingo, baking, whatever their interests are. It's someone doing an activity on a live stream whilst asking for donations to a cause that they believe in. So it's literally just tapping into people who already enjoy the content of this person, but they're then providing donations to that cause that they want to raise funds for.
So the technology is at the fingertips of so many millions, tens of millions of people in this country who are using it on a daily basis. Emily, I'd be really interested to hear a bit about Leeds Mind's gaming and streaming journey. Before you launched Get Together Through Gaming, were you involved with any gaming fundraising or streaming fundraising initiatives?
Yeah, so we've got a really brilliant fundraiser on the team called Sophie, who's currently on parental leave, else it might have been her chatting with you today. And as an avid gamer herself, she'd kind of recognised the opportunity, really wanted to do something in the space. But like with many charities, we're a small team, we've got to be quite resourceful. So it felt like a big task. And it was when Sophie was introduced to Carl and the team at Few and Far that it sort of started to gain legs and it became something that felt achievable for us.
And then that was when you launched this event, which now takes place annually.
Yeah, I think it took about a year to kind of develop and get it off the ground. Certainly at our end, I think we're at a bit of an advantage because we've got Sophie and her husband Jordan is actually heavily involved as well. He volunteers a lot of time towards Get Together Through Gaming and he's been really pivotal in its success. And then I'm a gamer myself as well. So I think we've got the knowledge and the passion within the team. And that's what we started out with. And then it's kind of Sophie's development work and working with Few and Far that's meant that we've been able to understand the streaming side of it then and build it into the fundraiser that it is today.
Col, coming back to you, you mentioned there YouTube when you were talking about anyone being able to connect to a broadcasting tool. And I'm sure everyone is incredibly familiar with how YouTube works. But in terms of actually fundraising, is that the best platform for charities to use? Or is there a site which is particularly useful for organisations who want to engage with this?
Yeah, I'd say there are four main ones to keep an eye on. Twitch is actually the biggest and most popular one. That's twitch.tv. That's been around since 2011. I think it gets around 30 million views every day. It's owned by Amazon, so it's a very big platform. YouTube is obviously the one that we all know about, and that's effectively what live streaming is. If you've ever seen a live video on YouTube where you see the little red dot, that's someone live right in the moment. It's not pre-recorded. Obviously, YouTube's been around for, going on 20 years. I think it's the second most visited website on the planet. So there's plenty of people with eyes on that. The other two are Kick, which is the most new streaming platform, the one that's probably directly trying to compete with Twitch as a streaming-only platform. However, it's backed by Stake.com, who have kind of an association with gambling. And then you have Facebook Live. Obviously, you can go live on Facebook as well. However, connecting to your console is not the easiest thing for that. So that's probably fourth on the list as far as a priority goes.
And then there are also specific fundraising platforms for streamers who want to be fundraising, like Tiltify.
Yes, so there's Tiltify. You also have things like Just Giving. Streamers can actually create a Just Giving page and then have their stream appear on their Just Giving page. So, for example, that's a nice way of kind of breaking down the barriers to entry for people who are wanting to understand what somebody's doing at that point to raise the money. People can go on Just Giving and actually watch it live rather than having to step into something like Twitch where they may be a bit unsure on what to do.
And if you're a charity, perhaps at the beginning of their gaming and streaming fundraising journey, that's quite a few different platforms to choose from. Emily, I wonder if you could provide any insight to the decision-making process that went on at Leeds Mind to decide that you were going to be hosting your event on Twitch.
I suppose because we were developing Get Together Through Gaming from the ground up, as you say, there's a whole choice of platforms that you can host on. So for us, it was about getting started with one. And for us, that makes sense to use the biggest platform.
And that's the beauty of these things, is that the infrastructure and the operational side of it is there with things like YouTube, with Twitch. It's not something that you're having to build yourself in-house. You don't have to put resource into developing a tool that's going to work for you. You have a ready-made streaming platform of your choice, which is highly accessible for users, and you can just make the connections. Connect with a streamer, I guess, is probably one of the challenges. But in terms of the operational side of it, everything is basically done and dusted for you.
We've been really lucky at Leeds Mind to work with Few and Far that have kind of put all the bells and whistles around it for Get Together Through Gaming. So we've got a microsite where people can really easily tune in to see whatever's going on then. But actually for other charities, I think there's a much kind of scrappier, lower bar way to get started. You know, all of those things that have come from Few and Far that have been instrumental towards our success. But I think in terms of charities getting started, like you say, the infrastructure is there to just kind of jump on.
So then moving on to something that you just touched on, Emily, streamers themselves. How does a charity start to engage streamers in the first place, and how do they know who are good ones to approach?
I think a lot of charities automatically would think of the streamers they may have heard of before, or of, knowing the public, like KSI or Mr. Beast or someone like that. But that's going to be practically impossible for most charities to reach out to. Obviously, if you know them or they're a friend of a friend, that's great. You're probably going to raise a lot of money in a very quick space of time. But how we'd like to work is we'd assume that most charities are not well connected to larger organizations or larger streamers. And so really it's more about how we've done it with Get Together Through Gaming, is reaching out to those smaller streamers, those ones who are local to us. They might have a few hundred followers, a few thousand followers. I think even having a few hundred followers shows that they have a level of commitment to streaming and are on it quite a lot. Obviously you can end up reaching out to a lot of people who have none, and you're not going to hear back because they've maybe tried streaming once and never done it again. So it would all be about reaching out to those sort of smaller but committed streamers in your region, or that align with your values as an organization. That is definitely where we started. And from there, it's just grown and grown.
Yeah, from Leeds Mind's point of view, unfortunately, there's no kind of secret sauce to it. It really is just doing the legwork and the hard work of the research and the reaching out to people. So like with so many other fundraisers, it's really like a people game. It's a hearts and mind thing. It's really about people like Sophie, our fundraiser, just researching, reaching out, being lovely and personable. And as I said before, kind of getting stuck in as well. So not just approaching the streamers with an ask, but actually tune into some of their streams and see what their vibe is about and see what their platform is like, and then talk to them about how getting involved might benefit them as well.
And on that benefiting them side, do you have any thoughts on what would make a specific charity appealing to a fundraiser? Col, you mentioned making sure that you're aligned with their values, perhaps that they have a personal connection to your charitable cause area. Are there any other things that would really make a charity stand out, perhaps to one of those really high profile streamers that get a lot of approaches?
I think when it comes to the larger names, I think unless they've already maybe done fundraising in that kind of space or for that type of cause, I do think it's very, very hard. If you were to reach out to a famous streamer, their team behind them it's going to be very difficult. But I'll give some examples. I think, if you're an animal charity, for example, you can find streamers who are pet lovers on Twitch or on YouTube. Maybe have their pets on stream. Maybe they play games such as Animal Shelter or Nintendogs that are all about looking after pets and animals. It's a very, very obvious thing, but that automatically aligns those types of people with you, people who care for pets. Are you a sustainability or wildlife type charity? There are streamers out there who have live nature cams showing farm animals, and people tune in to watch them at feeding time. So just like YouTube, Twitch has browsing, so you can browse for all types of different categories and things like that. So trying to find those people isn't that difficult. It's just maybe about getting that connection with them, like actually being able to get a response from them, a message, an email, and vice versa. I think on the streaming part of who you can acquire, a lot of that really is just about making that connection, as I've said, And obviously it wants to be something that they're going to enjoy fundraising for. They're already in a space that they enjoy. They're already streaming and playing games and having a community and having conversation. But then aligning that with something that you know that they believe in, I think it's kind of gold then at that point.
And do you think there would ever be a moment where it would be appropriate for a charity to pay a streamer to be fundraising on their behalf?
I don't see a problem with that, but however, how most streamers are set up is that they are using these tools like Twitch to pay themselves. So they are using subscriptions and gifts and stuff like that to actually monetize it as a job. So a lot of them now are part-time, full-time. Some people just do it as a hobby and are not really interested in that kind of stuff. So I think ideally as small charities, if we can avoid paying the streamers, that's obviously a lot easier for us and a lot more scalable. However, there are positives for streamers to be involved in something like this. Obviously, if you're promoting them, you're promoting their streams, they're getting more eyes on their streams, their content, a bigger audience. And a lot of that stuff we found has helped with those streamers to get things like Twitch affiliation, which is that kind of next level of Twitch partner effectively, where it helps them monetize even more so on their live stream. So it can kind of work both ways. You're promoting them, they get more eyes on their content, and they're then raising more money for your organization.
I think one of the most important things about any kind of streaming is authenticity. And you've kind of both talked about there having people who are aligned with the cause or have a personal connection to the mission. And I don't think that paying people is necessarily against that, as long as you're very clear about what it is you're doing and why it's happening. But that authentic piece is absolutely essential, because people will genuinely congregate around almost anything if it feels authentic and fun. I don't know if anyone else here remembers the moment in 2016 when the UK collectively lost their minds and thousands of people spent hours watching a live stream of a puddle in Newcastle.
I remember that.
Yeah, there was a Periscope video of a heavy storm outside I think it was a marketing agency's office in Newcastle, and this huge puddle had formed, and the CCTV was capturing people walking by outside and trying to navigate their way around this enormous puddle. And it made the BBC, and thousands of people spent far too much time of their day watching as people outside just tried to get around it by whatever means possible. If we can do that, really the sky's the limit in terms of how you can capture people. I wonder, at Leeds Mind, besides the very valuable input from Col and from Sophie on your team, have you had much kind of higher up involvement from the broader charity? Any executive or trustee involvement in the process? Is there interest there from the top?
Yeah, so like with all other fundraisers, we try and get the whole team involved in things. So if we've got runners out on a half marathon, we'll put together a little cheer squad. So that's kind of what we've tried to replicate with Get Together Through Gaming, is having people going on the streams and getting in the chats to kind of support the people raising money for us, really. I think with streaming, there is an additional barrier in that if the whole concept feels very alien to somebody and they don't know kind of how they go about that, there's that kind of barrier to getting involved. So there's definitely the appetite. And then we've had to do a few things to kind of help with that engagement. So demystifying, how easy it is to tune in and get involved, really.
And what about from a governance perspective as well? And I'm thinking specifically of a safeguarding perspective in terms of vetting who it is that you're partnering with or who is streaming in order to fundraise on behalf of the charity. Any thoughts that go into that?
Yeah, it starts with the research phase. So it's doing that usual due diligence that you do when you're working with anybody and sort of figuring out, does this person act in line with our values? Like with a lot of other types of fundraisers, there's only so much of that you're able to kind of control and police. So we have our processes in place, similarly to if somebody was at risk in a support group, really. We have the internal processes to be able to make sure that somebody's safe and that they know where to access support. And then as fundraisers as well, it's kind of having a boundary to that and being really upfront with people. We've got it on our Discord channel, for example. about the fact that this channel is run by fundraisers. So by all means, we can have a conversation about mental health, we can signpost you to more support, but we're not in a position to actually offer that live mental health support.
What I found really interesting looking on your micro website, Get Together Through Gaming, is the really heavy emphasis from word 1 or 2 of the description of what you are all about on mental health, and how having this kind of initiative promotes mental health of people who are taking part in it. Could you tell me about how you designed this whole initiative to make sure that it was really in line with your mission and actually helping to form a community that essentially intrinsically promotes mental well-being?
Yeah, so a big part of it is about the streamers that come on board, so the people that we reach out to and engage with. And a lot of the streamers that have been involved over the years get involved because they care about mental health. So they've got personal experience, or they've supported friends or family with their mental health. So they're really passionate about the cause. So we are starting with an audience of people, or a community of people that kind of gets it and understands kind of what they need to do to look after themselves, and they understand what to do when they come across somebody that's struggling.
And I wonder, when it comes to building that audience out further, because as a charity you do have a ready-made audience, but as fundraisers you really want to build that to be as wide as possibly can be. Col, I wonder, what do you think are the best ways to sort of promote an initiative like this, to try and grow that audience further, make sure it's reaching as many people as it can be? Is there a link between streaming and effective social media engagement, or are these audiences that just really live in two different spaces?
It's a bit of column A, a bit of column B, to be honest. I think there's a lot of outreach and ensuring that you're reaching the right streamers, and ensuring that they understand what it is and that what you're wanting from them. But then we did have a lot of social media to back that up as well, to promote the idea of the event. We've actually stopped using that as much now, because we've already got this like almost natural community that keeps growing. They keep bringing in other streamers, other friends they know from their community who were signing up themselves. But early on, effectively the pilot year that we ran, that was all we had to rely on. So Instagram, just trying to get out in the world in the usual channels. Most streamers are on all of the social platforms, as you would probably expect. So just trying to meet them where they're at and promoting it that way. But really, it's about promoting to the streamers rather than to your typical audience who may be following you on Instagram already. So that can be a difficult balance to hit, but I think we managed it okay in that first year.
I guess the branding of the whole thing comes into it as well. Are you a standalone event, or are you under the umbrella of Leeds Mind? We don't really see Leeds Mind at the very forefront of the website, although, as I mentioned earlier, mental health is there as the key topic. What considerations did you make in that, Emily?
Yeah, so we had quite a long discussion about this at the start. You can imagine, as the marketing and comms person, I was fiercely protective of brand and wanted it front and centre. But as we were discussing it and developing the idea, actually we realised that having this kind of sub-brand or separate brand meant that we'd speak more directly to that audience. And this audience of young people is an audience that we hadn't really tapped into before. So we were already offering support to children and young people, but in terms of our fundraisers, there were fewer children and young people getting involved. So that's kind of why we made the decision to make it its own distinct entity.
And would you say that it's a regional initiative? Obviously, as Leeds Mind, you are operating in a very specific geographic region, but the internet is everywhere. How do you see the identity of the event in that respect?
I think there's a bit of push and pull about it, because obviously the bigger the event is and the more visibility our streamers get, then the more successful it'll be. But as a charity, we know that it's kind of local and regional people that are more likely to want to support us, because the work that we deliver is within those local communities and across the region. So yeah, we're certainly not averse to kind of growing and expanding, but we expect to have that engagement within the local and regional space.
And Col, I wonder if there's anything new or upcoming that you're seeing in the charity streaming space that you think is particularly innovative, exciting, or worth our listeners taking note of at the moment.
Selfless plug. I think next month we obviously have the event, and I think actually that'd be a really good opportunity for other charities to just tune in, see what it's about, obviously see some of the streamers that we've spoken with and collaborated with over the last few years. A lot of these streamers have done it since the first year, and they're coming up to their fourth event of doing it. So I would certainly like them to at least understand that. And, you could even do that before signing up to Twitch or anything themselves. Just have a bit of a check of it, do some due diligence, see what it's about. As far as new things in the space, I think that Twitch are only progressing in their kind of charity tool areas of their dashboard for creators. So they're providing more opportunities for streamers to literally have buttons quite apparent on their streams that are all about giving money to a charity that you're fundraising on behalf of. So they're kind of opening the doors and making it a lot easier all of the time for not only for charities to be on Twitch, but for people to donate to those charities as well.
And going back to people who want to drop into the Get Together Through Gaming event, how do they find it? Is it a case of Googling? Is it a case of having to go on to Twitch? Where can they find you?
Yeah, they can do both. However, we have a website, which is gttg.stream. This stream will actually be live on there from the 13th of March at 10 a.m. The website will convert from a countdown, which is what it's currently on, to a live video embed, basically. And you can pick who you want to watch, what you're interested in seeing. So we've kind of removed that barrier to entry, so you don't have to be on Twitch to watch the streams. And actually, any charity can do that. You can use the Twitch video embed to have it, for example, on a page on your current charity website if you were to do an event similar to that. So yeah, check it out on the website.
Emily, you've said you are an avid gamer yourself. Are you going to be live streaming yourself for this event?
Yeah, I'm hoping to have my setup finalised. I'm taking the lead from Sophie and her husband Jordan have streamed every year. I did stream with Sophie last year, but she handled all the technical side of it. So I'm hoping this year to do a kind of arty stream, because that's the other point here as well. We are called Get Together Through Gaming on the event, but it isn't just gaming. We have had art, music, all sorts in the past. So yeah, I'll, fingers crossed, be streaming.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we'll all be wishing you the best of luck.
So as somebody who's been working in this space for a number of years now, I wonder, Emily, what would your top tip be for somebody who's working for a charity who is really at the beginning of their journey and wondering where is best to start?
I think it's a case of putting the fear to one side and jumping in, getting on people's streams and just understanding what it's all about. Because I think without that baseline understanding, you're going to have a very difficult time kind of reaching out to people and doing that stewardship side of things.
And Col, any final tips or nuggets of advice that you could offer?
This is an opportunity for charities to connect with people where they're at. A lot of fundraising typically, historically, is about putting people out of a comfort zone, making them do a really difficult challenge. This is a complete other aspect to that, where people are in a safe space, something to doing that they enjoy that can actually raise a lot of money when it's done correctly. So the first thing I would recommend is that charities just sign up to Twitch, get an account on there, have a look around. As Emily said, scope it out, take a look at who's on there. And not only then sign up as a charity, but make sure you're registered as a charity on Twitch. So that would allow anyone to effectively fundraise on your behalf right now, whether you were doing anything to promote it or not. That would give streamers that option to, have people donate to you directly. I think they need a PayPal Giving Fund account to do that. But other than that, it's a very, very simple process.
Well, Emily, Col, it's been so great to have you with us. Thank you for all those pearls of wisdom and for telling us about the world of Twitch.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
We hope you enjoyed our discussion with Emily and Col. And that's it for this episode. Next week, we'll be asking how people working for small charities can make their working lives easier with the help of some common AI tools. But for now, from Emily and me and all of us at Third Sector, thank you so much for listening. Our producer is Nav Pal.